welcome back. And the holiday edition, a lot of the newspapers are yet to come out. And we'll stay with our online stories and also tell you a few of those that are in here. And TV3network.com has PURC orders ECG to suspend 40 billion software. And I'm sure that story is well known. Consumers complaining and PURC stepping in because, according to them, more than 62% of complaints that have come in are as a result of what they call overbilling as compared to the previous year, when only 18% of complaints were about overbilling. We'll talk briefly about that. And also we'll be talking about the Judicial Service Staff Association strike. A meeting yesterday, we're told, ended inconclusively. We'll see which direction that meeting will take the two feuding parties, government and its employees. And then also we'll tell you more about what is on the Financial Post. The front page says that utilities cause distress losses. That's research that was done, and we're told that it's a looming crisis of confidence as consumers complain about burdensome billing and uncaring customer services from the Financial Post. This morning, those issues will dominate our conversation. My guest in the studio to my right is the Deputy Minister of Information, Felix Kwakye-Ofosu. Welcome, and thanks so much for joining us on this holiday.
Thank you.
And happy AU Day. And then to my left is a Member of Parliament for Bekwai, Honorable Joe Osewusu. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I hope you are doing great on this AU holiday.
Yeah.
All right, let's start from here. For consumers, Felix, let me start with you. It was good news yesterday. PRC stepping in to say that the complaints are just too many, and so the software, the new software that you're using to bill consumers, hold on and let's deal with the anomalies first, and then you can go back. For consumers, it is good news. But would you say that perhaps the PRC has waited too long, because complaints started very early when the new billing system started?
Well, I believe that the institutional arrangements that we have governing the energy sector are robust and have in place mechanisms aimed at protecting the interests of consumers. And so for some time now, there have been complaints about abnormal readings of meters and anomalies in billing. And it is a phenomenon that has affected everybody. I have personally experienced it. It was obvious that something was amiss because it was not the regular kind of billing that we were used to. The ECG itself has on a number of occasions engaged consumers with a view to addressing it, but it does not appear like any concrete step had been taken on their part to address the numerous complaints and concerns that had come in. So a number of things happened. On Monday, government itself put out a statement which was signed by the Minister for Communications, in which it expressed agreement with the concerns expressed by consumers and the Ghanaian public at large, and therefore requested the PURC to take immediate action to preserve the interests of consumers and ensure that they are cushioned against these abnormal bills. Subsequent to that, on the same day, Monday, a meeting was held between PURC, ECG, the developers of the software that is being used to bill consumers, the Energy Commission, and the Power Ministry. At that meeting, it was decided that there was a need to take a second look at the software. And so a task force was formed to audit the software. Now, out of that meeting was the action that the PURC took yesterday, when it asked ECG to suspend the use of the latest software that we were using, which had been identified as the cause of these anomalies, pending the conduct of the audits, which would then inform what is done to ameliorate the situation. So there is every evidence that government as an entity is deeply concerned about the matter and is taking steps to ensure that the right players in the sector take appropriate remedial measures. Of course, we have all had concerns about customer service from ECG, even long before this billing matter became an issue. There had been regular complaints about customer service and how responsive they were to concerns and complaints expressed by consumers. A lot of work is happening, to inject greater efficiency and more customer-friendly practices in the way that they operate. But the most important thing is that the concerns and cries of consumers
have got into the ears
of those who matter. Mind you, government is a bit constrained in terms of intervening directly because of the institutional arrangements that we have. But as the ultimate entity that is in charge of administering the country, we have not reneged. We have, for want of a better expression, kicked the appropriate agencies into action, and that is what you see. It is our belief that the processes will be expeditiously carried out so that consumers are relieved from this clearly burdensome billing.
What about the concerns that, in fact, what we're paying now is as a result of the many taxes that have been put out there on these utilities, not necessarily because of the faulty machine or equipment, but of course the taxes. For instance, the opposition leader Nanado is suggesting that these taxes are what is causing the increases and not necessarily these equipment.
Well, first of all, let me say that the statement from the opposition leader is a bit superfluous because it came after steps had already been taken to get the matter addressed. It is not unusual for opposition parties, and it is allowed within the context of party politicking, to want to take advantage of genuine concerns, for partisan benefit. But like I said, it is allowed. I'm sure that if it were another party that found itself in opposition, it would do same. But the most important point is that the key issues had already been identified and were receiving attention. It is also not accurate that the anomalies in the billing are due to taxes that have been slapped on the utility price. Yes, an energy levy was introduced, which was clearly explained. The president articulated it clearly in his State of the Nation address and showed why it was necessary to take that measure. By and large, the Ghanaian public appeared to have sided with the government, even though we acknowledge that it is a difficult measure. The Ghanaian public understood that it was necessary to take that measure to have a more robust energy sector. Nonetheless, you recall that in January, when the new, tariff regime took effect, there were similar complaints. So ECG quickly came out and indicated that, yes, they had noted that the rates that were currently being charged were over and above what had been approved, even with the new tariff regime. And therefore, they proceeded to assure customers that they were going to refund. Indeed, I'm aware that about 5 million Ghana cedis of refunds
has been
that is in
given
terms
back
of
to
credit
consumers.
have been given back to consumers. So that difficulty was actually rectified. But this one has to do with anomalies, because even if you put all the levies and the other things that go into the tariff together and you set it against what consumers are actually paying, there's a wide difference which cannot be accounted for by the new tariff regime. So it is a matter of anomalies that have been detected.
All right.
That will be correct.
I'm grateful, Felix, for your submission. Let me go to Honorable Joe Sewusu. So the PRC has taken this decision, but there's still the concerns that the taxes are what is killing the consumer, and not necessarily the anomalies. But Felix thinks otherwise.
It is usual for him to think otherwise, because actually it's a policy of the government that is being implemented by PRC and all the agencies in the energy sector. Who determines the taxes to be added to the build-up? How many taxes and levies are there? If you remove those taxes and levies, will the price build-up be the same? No. So you cannot ever dismiss the influence that the component parts of the build-up that come together, even the tariffs we are paying. If you compare what we pay in Ghana to what we pay to our neighboring countries, like Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, you find that Ghana's is almost 3 times. And in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, for example, they don't even have the option of hydro, which is much cheaper, So what is it that we are not doing right, such that for probably the same variables, our prices are almost 3 times that of our neighbors?
Would they rule out the fact that our system went into trouble and so there was the need to get it back on track?
What trouble?
Well,
what are we talking
the energy
about?
crisis. We're told the energy crisis, and so the need for that levy to make sure that sector gets what it needs to operate.
At all points in time, we had sufficient capacity. What we didn't have was the fuel. We are adding to the capacity, but it hasn't changed the fact that at any point in time, that the time that we're having the crisis, we had enough generating capacity if we had sufficient fuel to run them. So there was no such crisis that it came from nowhere, really. But the point of the matter is, the levies and taxes aside, what we're talking about now is having agreed on a tariff. The implementing agency is overcharging. Now, if we say they should suspend it, Felix has suggested that there's been a refund. I have not seen one, and I've compiled all my bills. I've not seen one indication that you were overbilled at this rate and you have had such a refund. I don't know about those who are buying the prepaid meters, how that is reflecting in their prepaid records, you know. So when we talk about refund, but it is not showing. There was a time you saw in the bill that government is paying so much for you, and it indicated on the bill. So you would have paid 15 cedis, but they say government is paying 50% for you, so you pay 14 cedis, 50%. It is clear how that is calculated. For me, it doesn't matter, so long as there's record that this is. But I haven't seen anywhere on my bills that there's a refund at any point in time. So there are two issues here. Already, our own build-up is way too much compared to our neighbors. We could do a lot better than what we're doing. Then we have a situation where the agency that is implementing even the approved rate is also ripping us off. I find it most unacceptable that you go and bring in something we call software, and you do not practice and try it, and you start implementing it to the detriment of your customers. Indeed, that's where I find even the steps taken by PURC disappointing. When did they start? Before they started implementing that, did the PURC intervene? Could they not have? You and I as consumers together may not be able to engage ECG. That is why PURC is supposed to stand in for us. So it should not be acceptable for the agency, ECG in this instance, to start implementing something which has not been tried and proved to be efficient before they start rolling it out. Then after they have ripped us off, you come back and say, stop. How long have they ripped us off? And how are you going to ensure that people get paid for the refund we're talking about? You know, so the agencies that are implementing government policy themselves are a big challenge. And then that is on top of rates that are very high. And so we should look at the situation from 2 points of view. Our rates are high.
Our taxes?
Our taxes and levies on the price build-up for power is high, and we are not competitive, even in our sub-region. I mean, I'm sure you may have reported here of firms and companies threatening to relocate to our neighboring Cote d'Ivoire.
Well,
because
we're told that there's not a single one that has moved there, because it's just people talking about that.
Well,
but the evidence isn't there.
Well, they have threatened, they have spoken, and they have cited power. I think yesterday there was a publication that about 5,000 jobs to be lost because the firms in the steel industry are threatening to move. So they're threatening, hoping that will correct the situation. If we don't, they will eventually. And I think that it's something that should be of concern to everybody.
Grateful. Felix, so for instance, he talks about the fact that he, as a postpaid customer, hasn't seen any of the refund. But some of the prepaid customers have said they have noticed some kind of refund on your system.
Yes.
Is the refund across the board?
Well, to be honest with you, I am not a frontline staff of the ECG. So
right.
It will be presumptuous on my part to assume that I can explain the technicalities. But what I can testify to is that I am a prepaid customer and I experience the refund. Perhaps Honorable may want to take the issue up with the nearest office of the ECG where he lives, so that what is due him is sent to him. But I'm aware of that particular. Indeed, the ECG itself announced it. So I'm a bit surprised that postpaid customers appeared not to have benefited, but perhaps it's an issue of technicality that can be resolved. Again, you see, it is not entirely accurate to blame the tariff regime itself. You see, if you look at the amount of increase that we have witnessed over the period, and you compare it against actual tariff that people are paying, it cannot be put down to taxes or any other levies for that matter. For instance, there's an entity, I do not want to mention the name for very obvious reason, that was paying about 112 Ghana cedis every month. Now, suddenly they are paying 1,368. That's a month. I mean, that's, if I'm not mistaken, is almost like 1,000%.
1,000%.
It cannot be due to taxes and levies. So there definitely is a problem with the way that the billing or the bill is computed. And in an instance like that, the only thing that one can do is to take a second look at the system that is being used itself. So that point must be clearly established. Like I said, of course, it is not too pleasant a duty for government and other stakeholders in the sector to increase tariff or impose tax and all that. But I explained that there was a need because of the legacy debts in the energy sector, which were running into almost 5 billion Ghana cedis. And this has accrued over a long period of time, predating this government, and even the one that preceded it. So it was necessary to take some step to address
to
it
deal
once
with
and
it.
for all. Otherwise, we run the risk of running the system aground. And I think that by and large...
But Mr. Sewusu disagrees with it and thinks that, well, there was no crisis at all.
No, you see, again, there's the need for us to go back and establish the facts. At the time that the energy crisis or the electricity crisis intensified, there was real evidence of a system breakdown due to generation, lack of capacity. Indeed, when the president went to parliament in 2014, was it, 2015 rather, he tabulated the exact causes of the problem. You see, we have a generation mix. Some of the plants use gas, others rely on fuel, and then there are hydro sources. Sometimes the hydro sources can dry up, and it is through no fault of ours. It is either due to hydrology or weather patterns or what have you. So the amount that you receive normally in terms of generation capacity will reduce. Then sometimes some of the equipment break down. It is not scheduled for maintenance, but it breaks down. And in that instance, you have no option than to shut it down and repair it. Sometimes too, you have unreliable supply of gas from Nigeria. And perhaps the West African gas pipeline will go down as perhaps the most unreliable and non-sustainable investment ever. Because after spending so much money, it has really never lived up to its potential. And consistently, for reasons best known to them, one excuse after the other, the volumes of gas we received have not been sufficient to power some of the thermal plants. Some of the thermal plants operate solely on the basis of gas. They cannot use any other fuel. Right. There are some too, especially in the Abuazi enclave, that can be converted to use, gas and diesel or what do you call it, light crude or other forms of fuel. Then recently we've brought in the car power barge, Ameri, Asogli. They've had a second phase added. There's also the thermal power plant, which I'm told can alternate between several fuels. So at the time that the crisis intensified, for some reason, all these factors coincided. There were equipment breakdown, there were shortages in gas supply, which is beyond our control at the moment, especially for the thermal enclave. Because of the Etuabo gas plant, we are able to resolve the gas supply, unless there's a problem with the FPSO, we resolve that for the Western enclave. So all these were clearly stated and set out in the president's, So the issue of fuel has really never been a major issue. Of course, it is very expensive to buy fuel, to fuel thermal plants, and everybody would agree.
But it was not a matter of the fact that there was no money.
No. You see, it has never been the issue. Indeed, like I really encourage you to look at the president's speech again in 2015, February, when he appeared before Parliament to deliver the State of the Nation address. You will find all these things clearly articulated. So again, I would caution that the comparison with our neighbors, if we are not careful, we'll paint a misleading picture. You see, we don't have a homogeneous electricity system across West Africa. Every country has its own particular, arrangements. So, as I sit here, I'm unable to tell what specific generation mix Cote d'Ivoire is using. So, to go to Cote d'Ivoire and simply pick their rates and compare it to ours may be misleading.
We don't need to stay competitive?
No, you see, we have to be competitive. But inherent in the competition are also the factors of production. If your factors of production, for some reason, and reasons beyond your control, are higher than what exists in Cote d'Ivoire, I don't think that it is fair to conclude right away that something necessarily wrong has been done in Ghana. Again, you look at the demand of Cote d'Ivoire. Look, in fact, our demand, peak demand this year, I'm told, is bigger than the demand of all the countries to our west put together. So we are not in the same bracket. So it's unfortunate. Why? Somebody can compare our electricity system to that of Nigeria and draw conclusions that ours is superior. It may not necessarily be the case because of their own challenges, their size and all that. So we need to be cautious. I know that for political reasons, it is easy to draw these comparisons without picking out the real issues and addressing them. So we need to be cautious. But the point is that we need to take solace in the fact, and I hope that the utility service providers and the other key players will up their game so that they are a bit more proactive. They don't wait for the problem to linger too
before
much
we rush to go and deal with it. Mr. Sewusu, so the comparison, the lack of capacity, so all these were challenges, and that particularly the comparison isn't right, according to Felix.
Well, I sympathize with him. If I have a higher demand, I should be cheaper because
we're talking economics.
Yes.
Not necessarily.
But if when you're talking,
all factors being equal, you need
if you're talking about even generation mix, Ghana has an advantage because Ghana has hydro, which is cheaper. The others don't. Our hydro now is around 35% in our generation mix. It used to be the highest, 59. Now it's gone down because of the other investments we've done in the other area. So whether it is thermal or it is gas or it is light crude, it is the same factors in La Côte d'Ivoire that is ours. But we get the added advantage of having a cheaper 35% of our generation mix. So the explaining away, as Felix is trying to do, that there's no basis for comparison, for me, it isn't right. There is. Our geography is the same. Our neighbors, our geography is the same. What added advantage we have? The hydro, and then even our demand. Because once you have the advantage of your output being bought at a higher rate, then your returns, your investment cost, the cost spread will be lower. Is that not the case?
Well, it is
all
always
things
the case,
being equal.
yes.
In this case, all things necessarily ought to be equal. You know. So I think that we must understand that in this business, whether we like it or not, particularly in attracting investment that will generate jobs, we are in competition with our neighbors. We can never run away from that. And if at any point in time our neighbors offer better facilities, better services, whoever is wanting to invest is more likely to move to our neighbors, to our disadvantage. We had a huge advantage when there were problems in our neighbors. I mean, I'm not saying that somebody's problem should necessarily be an advantage, but we did get advantage. I know in the shipping industry, for example, we did have a huge advantage from the landlord countries when there was a problem between Cote d'Ivoire and Burkina and so on. So how we harness those advantages to leverage and to maintain our hold on being a more competitive country up to date, I find that we appear to be losing our grips. And energy is one major part. In all the energy, they price it based on the dollar. So much dollar cent per unit and so on. If you compare, you find that ours is way too high. Indeed, we may find all kinds of explanations to justify or explain away, but we have no choice but to work for ours to be at par or at worst slightly lower, such that it will not make much difference to an investor.
Despite the differences in the two environments?
Which
environments?
I have traveled on the road to Cote d'Ivoire, to Togo. I don't see, you can't even tell the difference when you cross the border. There is no difference between us, whether it is our northern part or our southern part. The investments and the cost of investments and the cost of doing business here has always been, and the ethics, our business ethics, have always been a big challenge that we must brace up to accept our weaknesses and correct them. I don't think that Cote d'Ivoire would probably have, of course I'm speculating, that would have accepted this practice of bringing in a software which would fleece its customers. Probably, if we were more vigilant, if our PURC was more serious and more proactive, this may not have happened at all. How are we looking at other investments? We're here. When we had that ECG, for example, buying...
meters?
No, not the meters, the transformers that were blowing up. Where were they buying from? How did that happen? All these unethical practices in procurement and so on, they go to feed into the cost, which eventually is passed on to the customer. And the earlier we faced up to these things and dealt with them, the better for the country and for the citizenry.
Is a reduction, Felix, I'll give you the chance to react quickly, but is a reduction by the call by the opposition leader, the leader of your party, Nanado, is that indeed the case, or perhaps he's only playing a game, taking advantage of the situation? Because in the past, we've seen leaders in the opposition talk about reducing fuel prices, and yet when they get into power, then they realize that indeed reduction isn't the case. We have cases we can easily recall. Is Nanado taking advantage of the situation, or indeed reducing these tariffs can be done?
I'm very confident that we have looked at what it is. Indeed, Professor Michael Kwe, who was himself a former minister, has spoken to this matter, I think that Saturday, before Nanado made a statement, and he outlined how an MPP government and what steps will take to reduce the cost of power. So it is a programmed activity that we have lined up, which we believe that to make us reduce the cost of power. But Felix here will admit that indeed it is doable.
Sure.
It is doable. And indeed, what we're experiencing now shows clearly that if people were more diligent, we would not have experienced what we're experiencing in the first place. The 1,000% increases and so on itself, it's as a result of failure of the people in charge.
So that means we can clear this mess, and so there's not necessarily a reduction in the prices? No,
that is one.
Okay.
And then you're talking about the build-up. The rate of taxes and levies you have put on it. What goes into that, you can look at it and reduce these ones, and the prices will come down. I mean, look around you. I mean, the number of taxes, one by one, at all levels. Today, when I pick my
there's VAT, there's a 10% levy,
right.
There is a couple of them.
So many of them. And we are saying that we can remove and reduce some of the...
There's also a flat rate of 7 cedis, VAT 17.2, the energy levy 10%.
You can either reduce the rate or remove some of them. Because indeed, all you're doing is putting more money into the kitty. But when you take money from the poor...
We don't need that money?
Don't you also need it? You and I need it. Government says he needs it.
We need it for development. That's what.
Do you need it to live? You and I, we need it to live. When you take that and you put that against all other cost centers for your individual, your rent, your water, your fuel bill, and then your regular school fees, even for KGs and so on, you find that you and I needed more than the government.
Than the state.
Yes.
I'm grateful. Felix, so it is doable?
All right, let me say that in principle, I do not disagree with Honorable Osei when he makes a point about the need to achieve greater efficiency in order to beat down costs. Indeed, that is has been the objective of successive governments. As to whether or not that objective has been realized is another matter. But he would also agree that there have been long-standing systemic difficulties in that sector, owing to years of underinvestment, either at the generation, transmission, or distribution level. In recent times, or at least I can speak for my government, there's no doubt that we have put in significant investments. At the very least, in the last year or so, an additional 1,000 megawatts capacity has come on stream, and I can break them down. I spoke about car power, I spoke about Mary, as of the second phase, the first part of the second phase. thermal power plants, some IPPs have also come on board. There's actually a company that is now adding about 20 megawatts to the generation mix from Winneba through investment in solar. So there has been substantial progress on the front of generation. Indeed, there are many other projects that are lined up, some of which are already underway.
Right.
That will ensure further increase in our generation capacity. You see, but there are also a number of home truths that we need to confront. And he's alluded to some of them in his submissions. In the past, we were predominantly reliant on hydro. And hydro was so cheap. In fact, the only resource you needed was water. And then you maintain the equipment and you are good to go. So the tariff was very low. And we had relied on it for decades. Perhaps it's an indictment on all of us as a country and successive governments that we did not project into the future. So we went to sleep, more or less. And then it dawned on us in the 80s that, hey, hydro was no longer going to be reliable. So there was a need to put in. So efforts began to put in place thermal complementation. Some have spoken about nuclear power, what do you call it?
There's even a coal one already in the system.
Yes, it's not that. In fact, there's actually a project in the Bunahafo region that is aimed at using biomass, basically growing trees that you can fell and then use to fire what do you call it? Thermal plants. It is ongoing, and I'm sure that at the appropriate time
there's one Samra boy.
Absolutely.
Right, Samra boy.
Exactly.
Right.
So all those help. But some of the costs involved in initiatives like nuclear and all that are a bit prohibitive. And what it takes to run such a system is quite involving and demanding. So we need to be a bit cautious in the sort of projections that we make. I believe that there are ways that in the medium term we can address this our problem and inject efficiency without necessarily overstretching ourselves as a country. Because if you go to advanced countries, there are many nuclear plants that are closing down as I speak to you because of the challenges involved in running them. And apart from safety issues and all that, the costs are also a bit prohibitive. That said, we all know that especially at the distribution level, there are serious inefficiencies. We have for years spoken about losses that are incurred, transmission losses. At the last reckoning, I understand that about 18 to 20%, about 30% of losses 30%. Are incurred because of the systems that we've put in place. That is how come government has recently been speaking about the need to inject some private sector participation at that level to generate the sort of efficiency that we are all yearning for. Shake up the system a bit and ensure that we get the best from our service providers. Of course, because of the way that we have done our things in the past, that has met with some resistance. But I think that overall, it is more beneficial for us to have that kind of injection to achieve that reliability. So that point must be stressed. So in principle, I'm not disagreeing with this point. But it is the specifics of it that need to be recognized. Because of the lag that we've had over the years, it will take some time and some effort to address it. Indeed, the evidence shows that we are actually doing all of that. We have been bold to speak about private sector participation in distribution. We have spoken about reforms taking place in transmission and the additional investments we've made in the generation side, which are very fabulous, I speak. Now, on the issue of the taxes and levies and all that, like you rightly pointed out, when you're in opposition, it is fairly easy to make bold declarations about removing taxes and all that. Indeed, there's a history. And it is instructive that Nana Akufo-Addo himself issued a statement yesterday. Because it is not the first time that he will be calling for the removal or reduction of taxes. You recall the introduction of VAT itself. He led demonstrations and all that. But when he came to power, reality dawned on them. So the very tax that they opposed, whilst in opposition, they were compelled to increase in order to meet a specific demand of the citizenry. They introduced the communication service tax. They introduced the National Reconstruction Levy. They even increased the corporate tax a bit, I believe. And then they actually lowered the VAT threshold. That meant that more people were roped into the VAT bracket who were hitherto exempted. In the case of fuel, you recall that we were told that a gallon of fuel in 2000 was atrocious. Indeed, they increased it, and they came under pressure in the twilight of their administration to reduce it. And they reduced after the first round of the elections or so, I believe. So these are realities that confront governments. I think what we need to do as a country is to come to a certain conclusion. There are some areas that we do not need to play politics with. And in this regard, all of us are guilty. I have participated in demonstrations, haranguing government for increasing over fuel
utilities, fuel prices and all that.
Dr. Wekuwebe put it in context recently that he, when he was at VRE, took proposals for electricity tariffs to be increased by 100% in 2 successive years. And it happened. It was necessary for that to be done. Otherwise, the system will collapse. It is not that President Kufuor was insensitive or he was wicked or wanted to impose hardship, but it was necessary.
It is ironic that now.
No, you see,
those who demonstrated against it now.
No, but I've recounted the history. That Nana Addo himself, you see, Nana Addo himself has demonstrated against imposition of taxes and has been compelled to join his colleagues to increase taxes. Not that he himself as an individual found it pleasant to impose any hardship, but it was necessary in order to build our country. And I believe that by and large, Ghanaians have understood and accepted that there's a need to make these adjustments. What is at play now are abnormalities that should not have occurred owing to some system that had been introduced. And that is what we need to get addressed quickly. But as for the long-term issues, I don't think that we are in disagreement at all as to what needs to be done.
I'm grateful, Felix, for your time. Honorable, I'm sure you won't have any reaction. So you want to quickly,
I'm only happy that we are recognizing. But you see, in a governance arrangement, people must have the how and the why to be able to, the transparency.
Sure.
You represent me. You're doing this. So the how are you doing it and why? That part in billing and so is missing. The public discussions and engagement in the how and the why. Today, Felix and the government generally is panicking because the outcry is huge, including their own party people shouting that this time.
No, all of us.
That's the point. So I'm glad that Ghanaians now feel the pain so much and they are shouting so loud that government is compelled to take steps, which otherwise we are often reluctant to see. But it is important that we know the how and the why. I understand sometimes that when we use a dollar cent, the value of a dollar cent 2 days ago and a dollar cent today varies, and therefore it affects the pricing. Of course, that itself is a function of the government's own performance in managing the economy. But when people don't understand these things, when PURC promises, 50% increase, after that everything will be all right. You get it, nothing happens. 75% after that everything will be all right, nothing happens. Then it goes 65, nothing happens. And then suddenly, because now everybody is crying, business is complaining, then government comes and we are blaming ECG alone. We make it appear as if the ECG challenges are new. They have been there with us for a long time. Of course, it's such a bad failure as a country that they continue to be there. But I think that the more critical thing is that over the years, we hear of PURC mostly when there's a need for increment. They come and talk and give us all the explanations. After that, you don't see any follow-up showing that they represent us and they hold our welfare in high esteem. So I think that it is good we are discussing. Those Ghanaians are angry. They should continue to be angry at all the things that make them uncomfortable, so that government will take steps to deal with it. But I think that when we have leveled the ground with the challenges coming out of the billing, we should go to the tariffs themselves, open them up and look at what we can reduce to give Ghanaians some more comfort.
Right. I'm grateful, Mr. Sewusu, for your submission there. Now, let's jump to the JUSAC strike. Yesterday, a meeting between the minister and staff of the Judicial Service Staff Association, we're told, ended inconclusively. GBA is appealing to JUSAC to return to the courtrooms. We're told the NLC is talking about taking JUSAC to court, asking them that go back to work because your strike is illegal. This issue has been on for some time. This is not the first time JUSAC has embarked on this. A few weeks ago, they threatened and actually government had to step in. We're told that everything has been done. We're waiting for some more work from the president to get some misunderstandings addressed. Is that indeed the situation?
Well, let me indicate that workers reserve the right to demand better working conditions and what is due them. And to the extent that that desire to do so exists, labor unrest, or better still, labor boycotts would be with us for quite some time. It is nothing new. And I don't think that...
It doesn't tell of
not
the general environment.
As I speak to you, there's a strike in France, which has crippled their petroleum sector. And France is an advanced country. I don't necessarily believe that you can conclude that because of that there's been some mismanagement of the French economy. Like I'm saying, they reserve the right as workers to demand better conditions of service and what is due them. If there are salaries that are in arrears, they deserve them to be paid. But of course, this demand and agitation ought to be done within the framework of existing law. And to the extent that they comply with it, I would not have much of a difficulty. On the part of government, we will do what has to be done within the constraints of the budget to meet the needs of workers. I understand, however, that the NLC has taken a dim view of this action. They believe that it is unlawful and it will not be proper for persons working within the judiciary, the very bastions of our democracy, those who keep the gates, as it were, as far as the maintenance of law and order is concerned, will be the ones who find themselves in violation of our labor laws. It is also a bit instructive and ironical that the very place where NLC will be seeking justice in the matter is a place where there is some exactly it's a place where there is some gridlock because of the industrial action. But I understand also that at least some courts opened following the intervention of the Chief Justice.
The Apex Court sat yesterday.
Exactly.
Yes,
I do not know whether similar interventions can be put in place for the others. But by and large, I believe that there is goodwill on the part of all the parties involved to have the matter addressed. Whereas JUSAG is entitled to make the demands, and government, as an agency, as an entity, I beg your pardon, is also entitled to look within its budget and meet those needs. There's the need for them to observe.
JUSAG seems to suggest that any time there's an agreement, government default in fulfilling.
I've spoken to you about the need to work within the constraints of the budget. First of all, are those arrears in question things that have been budgeted for in the budget? Are we able to maintain financial discipline whilst meeting those needs? All these are factors.
But the employer agreed to pay the arrears.
Yes,
so
but
how come
so the point is that sometimes it is not necessarily the case that there's been a reneging on the commitments that have been made. Perhaps there's a breakdown in communication and understanding of exactly what needs to be done, and that can lead to an impression that the employer is unwilling. But in all of this, like I've said, industrial actions themselves are not new. What matters is that you follow due process to have a specific grievance address. It is not always the case that when workers go on strike, then they are necessarily right. There have been many strikes in this country that have been found to be unjustified, and government has strongly taken a position, and the matter has been resolved one way or the other. So I am confident that this one too will be resolved quickly without creating too many problems for our judicial system. Yes.
I see. Mr. Sosa, is that how you see it?
Well,
a tax very easy to be dealt with?
I don't know. If we're that easy, I'm sure it shouldn't have arisen in the first place. Because I keep reading about their demand. They said a consolidation of salaries approved by the Judicial Council.
Which was agreed on,
yes.
And yet the employer has failed to pay.
I understand Felix saying that there may not be a budgetary allocation or provision for it. If it were so, it would be a failure on the part of those who are preparing the budget. Because the agreement will predate the budget. You know, sometimes the government decides that, look, these are not my priorities. And therefore, yes, if we have to jettison some of the expenditure, then let this one go.
But justice administration, very key.
Exactly the point. And here I'm re-echoing the Bar Association's concerns that the unintended consequences are the effects on litigation. And like just Felix said, when I heard that the NLC said it was going to court, I started laughing. The people who receive your rate, they are on strike. So who are you going to file their rate with?
I see.
You know, so if that is the only approach, it is likely to delay the process of negotiation, because there will be no court to hear you in the first place. Nobody will be there to receive your rate. So I think the approach is, what is that is holding them back? Money is always at the center of it. Government and the Minister of Finance is very hard on that. I don't have a budget for it. Why didn't you budget for it in the first place? But we don't have money. But when the thing persists and people lose trust, you no longer trust your word, that is when the strikes happen. Often, if you go into it, you find that there have been made one promise which has not been fulfilled, another, a third. Then the leaders themselves come under pressure from their rank and file. And look, you came and told us a government promised to do it last June. June is over, we are in October, go back. They go. Or you promised to do it in December. Now we are in January, go back. Then at a point, the leaders have to stand up for their members so that they are working in their interests. So our word, when government gives its word, it must try to fulfill it. As of now, the workers, I believe, the judicial service staff, they hope that somebody will intervene quickly and get them what they want so that they can return to work. But if we start or we continue on, I'm going to court, we are not resolving the matter. You're only deepening the crisis. Often, NLC, I wonder why they come in at the last minute. You didn't inform us. But the Labour Commission, I think it was a mediator. And they should be proactive. I know sometimes the processes are as laid out by the rules. But if I were the person called the Labour Commissioner, I would have a very good working relationship with all the heads, such that you can have discuss informal arrangements with the Finance Ministry, with the Labour Ministry, so that there will be links that you communicate and you keep in touch to avoid situations which affect everybody. If you're a lawyer and your client is in custody and you have to apply for bail, or if you are the person who is in custody and your application for bail is pending just the day you're to be heard, then they go on strike. You are an unintended victim, and everybody is likely to be affected in this instance. Indeed, you may run out of time to file a process for which will forever bar you, because there's a 21 days. On the 21st day, you go and there's no court settling. It may be difficult to justify that I was supposed to file it this day when there was no sitting, you know. So I think we should find ways of resolving it, and that's reoccurring the bar associations one. The unintended victims are a lot more than we imagine.
Should JUSA go on strike? I mean, what are the key institutions that we can't do with? And the employment minister has hinted of enrolling them onto what you call the essential services list. Should they embark on a strike?
Well, they are not on it yet. So they're entitled to. When you put them there, then you may. But you see, it is not sufficient to enroll them there. When we enroll them,
stop them from embarking on some of these strikes.
No, but
because we're told that they left the table when the negotiations were on.
You see, if you put them there, then you treat them as the others there. There will be no need. Those there are a special breed of people. So you make sure they don't. If the soldiers go on strike, what will happen? You know, I'll end of the story where they were going to make some changes. The paymaster looked at the person who was coming to take over, and from his experience with him, his competence was not good. So he went to his superior and said, listen, if you let this man go and you bring this man, who I know is not good enough, we are all should be ready for it. Because if you delay the soldier salary for 1 day, they immediately reversed the changes they were making. You know, so everybody knows the consequences of those they call essential. So maybe there's an advantage in being called essential, because you'll be taken better care of and you have no excuse or no reason. But even now that they are not essential, so to speak, I think that these are matters we can resolve. And sometimes I think the things started, negotiations, if you read them, started way back. I don't understand why we wait and we refuse to budget for, they say the blow that is inevitably yours. When earlier taking, extricate you from his torrential and pestilential.
I'm sure Felix is laughing.
The secondary school days.
Okay, wrap up for me.
The fact is that, you know, these things ought to be done in an atmosphere of dialogue. So I am a bit surprised that they left the table in the manner that they did.
Because they claim their employer refused to abide by what they had agreed.
The only way that you are going to resolve this is dialogue. You can't take an entrenched position prior to negotiations. It is always better to keep an open mind and allow for the exchange of ideas, so that at the end of the day you achieve middle ground. Because I'm unable to remember any instance where demands that are made right from the onset are all met in the shape that they were made. At some point in time, some alterations are made to suit certain.
I hope the employer is not thinking that because it's an election year, it's been held to ransom.
Oh no! You see, like we said, when the president made a comment about government sticking to fiscal discipline.
Not listening to anybody who wants to go on
sometimes the demands are a bit unjustified. And if you are not careful, you allow election pressures. And labor unions are smart. They see that elections are coming, so governments are a bit more vulnerable.
This appears to have started earlier.
You know, governments are vulnerable, so they tend to tighten the screw a bit. But we cannot, as a country, allow just any demand at all to pass without
but this is not just any
no,
demand.
I'm not classifying this as one of them. I'm saying that Judicial should be open for dialogue.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it is only dialogue. And the experience is that it is dialogue that has always resolved these.
I'm grateful. Felix Kwachu is a Deputy Minister of Communications. Honorable Jose Wusu is a Member of Parliament for Bekwai in the Ashanti region. Thanks so much for spending your holiday the morning with us.
My pleasure.
Wish you a happy AU Day.